Hi, everyone. This is astrologer Tish Aiken, and I'm here to discuss the upcoming full moon that occurs on October 13th at 20 degrees of Aries. And this is already an intense week because we have Venus just recently entered Scorpio, which is its detriment, on October 8th, and it's going to be in Scorpio until November 1st. And it formed an opposition on Tuesday. And that can be very creative energy. It can be very unpredictable. It can be very erratic. And on Monday, we had the sun forming a square to Saturn, which can feel restrictive and held back. So it's, we've got Mercury and Scorpio transiting in Scorpio, which is very much about emotional, the desire for intimacy on a very emotional and primal level, and for healing around wounds, and I think really emerging on a very emotional level, and it's very intuitive in Scorpio. And on the 11th, it's coming into its shadow at 11 degrees of Scorpio, which harkens back actually to when Venus was in Scorpio last October. It retrograded on October 5th at 10 degrees and 55 minutes of Scorpio, and it's stationed direct in Libra, 25 degrees of Libra on November 16th. So that story is also getting conjured up by this upcoming Mercury retrograde, and by Mercury now being in its shadow, which means that it retrogrades officially on October 31st at 27 degrees of Scorpio, which also differs back to another time, actually, when Saturn was in Scorpio at the end of its transit in the summer of 2015. In July and August, Saturn was parked at 28 degrees of Scorpio, and then it's stationed direct. And so now, Mercury is going to bring that story up with the retrograde, but it's also bringing up definitely, I think even more intensely, the Venus retrograde last fall. And so it's really around what you want on a very emotional and core level, what is not serving you, because this upcoming full moon is squaring Pluto, which is the ruler of Scorpio, and which happens to have just stationed direct recently, last week. So there are a lot of things that we're being forced to examine: what's working, what's on your path, what's not working, what do you need to purge. And on Saturday, Venus is going to form an opposition to Uranus in Taurus, just as Mercury did earlier this week. And that could bring breakups, because with the full moon in Aries, the full moon itself is falling in the first house of self, and the sun in Libra is forming in the 7th house of partnerships. So there could be things coming to a culmination. If they're working, that could be transforming it and bringing it to a whole other level and empowering things, the situation, and hopefully you. But if things are blocking what your highest good is, there definitely will be some things that come up that I think inform you of this, and definitely could be some unexpected endings, because Uranus is very unpredictable. Whatever you think it's going to be, it most likely is something different. In fact, it probably is something different. And it can be very creative energy. Uranus is originality and innovation. So with an opposition to Venus, maybe you meet somebody unexpectedly. Maybe there's a breakthrough in a relationship, which is a really cool one. Hopefully that's what it is. And this full moon squaring Pluto is going back to the Saturn-Pluto story. So Pluto, in this full moon chart, there's Pisces rising, and the moon happens to be in Pisces right now, and I've gotten very little sleep, so I am kind of all over. I'm doing this much more on an intuitive level than an organized one, although I don't know how often I'm that organized in this anyway. But very much coming from how I'm feeling, and just kind of receiving the information as I can. And so the full moon, it has Pisces rising, and Neptune is in the 12th house. It's near the ascendant, but it's in the 12th house, which is in its rulership. And then we have the moon in the first house of self, opposing the sun in Libra in the 7th. The sun is technically in its detriment in the 7th house, so it's not the easiest placement. Venus is in its detriment in Scorpio, and Mercury's in Scorpio. So there's a lot around desire and around the desire to merge on a very deep level, but could be the fears. Maybe that's the moon and sun squaring Pluto, releasing those fears. What are you letting hold you back? Because really a square is more on an internal level than with others. I mean, definitely there will be some endings and changes and information. And the thing now with Mercury in its shadow, so going back to that story, it now is at 11 degrees of Scorpio. It's going to retrograde on October 31st, and then it's going to station direct on November 20th at 11 degrees of Scorpio. So some things that you're working on now, whether it's around relationships or work or whatever the story is coming up for you, you can revise it when it does station direct at in November. But also knowing that Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is very intuitive, very emotional. It can be very psychic. I mean, Mercury in Scorpio really gets to the harsh reality of things, and it's very vulnerable. And I think part of this is really facing vulnerability. And Pluto having station direct is all about power. But to really obtain power, you have to be vulnerable, and you have to face your fears, and you have to be brave, right? And the moon in Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is the ancient ruler of Scorpio. So there are these Pluto-Mars themes in that, and Aries is much more, it's a fire sign, and it's more, it's the warrior. But Scorpio, it's kind of tough, and it's got the ancient ruler being Mars. So facing your fears, and if there are people or circumstances blocking you, then definitely releasing them. But hopefully you're releasing yourself in the way that you're blocking yourself, because I think a lot of that's going to come up. And again, deferring back to last fall when Venus was retrograde, if there probably are going to be things that get triggered from what was happening at that time, end of October, November, when Venus was retrograde and stationed direct in Libra on November 16th, but also now facing the Pluto-Saturn story, because Pluto having gone direct, it's meeting up with Saturn on January 12th. Well, again, how are you restructuring your goals? Saturn and the South Node fall in the house of career. So that's, where you're in the full moon chart, so where you're structuring your goals. Pluto is in the 11th house of friends and groups, squaring the sun and the moon. So there may be friendships or organizations or alliances that maybe you're rethinking, or you're again bringing to another level. But it's an intense time. Venus in Scorpio is very intense, and it's going to be there until November 1st. Mercury is going to be in Scorpio until December 9th. So we've got these two planets in Scorpio, Venus in its detriment, the sun in Libra in its detriment, so not the easiest. Mars is also in its detriment because it rules Aries, the ruler of this full moon. So it can be hard to get things going. And on Saturday, having Venus oppose Uranus, and Mars and Libra form a quincunx to Uranus in conjunct. So there's an adjustment needed, but also to go for what you want, because the sun in Libra is forming an aspect of opportunity to Jupiter, and Jupiter is the planet of abundance. It brings more than one opportunity. It opens up many doors, and it's in its dignity till December 3rd. So working with that, because that's very opportune energy, and it trines the moon in Aries. So that brings optimism behind all of this. So it's not all negative, but it is facing fears. It is getting ready for Saturn and Pluto. And it's the last time that the sun and Jupiter are going to work in harmony, because next month the sun will be in Scorpio. It'll be a little different. But I think this is going to be a pretty wild few days. This week has been already, I think, with the sun square Saturn on Monday, which is readjusting what you need to work with and facing lessons on that. And on Monday, the sun squares Pluto, but again, that's more internal than probably with other people. There could definitely be power struggles, but I think it's more about finding how you connect with your power. And Scorpio is very much about connection and intimacy, but it does not screw around, if I might say that. So I wish you a lot of luck, and thank you very much. Take care.